Hi everyone, and welcome to today's webinar with Kayako. Today we're going to hopefully kind of give you some insights on how to kind of tear down the walls between your development department and your support department, try and get some more kind of meaningful change for your customers. My name is Javier McGrath, and I'm the Customer Success Consultant at Kayako. And my primary roles at Kayako are to make sure our support team have kind of like the backing of the company and the knowledge and power to kind of give the best outcome to our customers. And today we're going to be joined by Javier, and he's kind of the Customer Success Champion at Geckoboard. And he's going to take you through some slides about kind of how to understand what Geckoboard do and how that can kind of help you and your customers. First, a little bit about Kayako. And so, Kayako is designed around the unified customer service experience, and the idea here is to make it as effortless as possible for your customers to contact you and give them the best experience and outcome that they're looking for. We're currently supported by about 131,000 support professionals around the world, and they kind of use Kayako day in, day out to kind of deliver effortless customer experience to their customers. During today's webinar, you can tweet us at Kayako and take part in kind of conversation on that level as well. You can also go to kayako.com and sign up for a free trial of Kayako on that site as well. If you have any questions today during the webinar, if you check on your GoToWebinar software, we have a questions box there. Feel free to ask any questions you have throughout the presentation, and then at the very end, we're going to have a Q&A session to go over those questions and hopefully get some answers for you. And so with that, let's kind of introduce Javier, and we'll switch present to you, Javier, and you can go through your slides.
Okay, so welcome everyone, and thank you for spending this hour with us. My name is Javier, and I'll be sharing some of the knowledge we've gained over the last year working in the support team and sort of working together with the development team and try to make sort of our processes a bit better. So first of all, what do we do? What's Geckoboard? So Geckoboard makes it easy for customers to build live TV dashboards that display key metrics, key business metrics using clear, glanceable visualizations that keep everyone on the same page and help enable everyone to react to changes faster. This is an example of a dashboard. I'm using this one because it sort of is going to help me out for you to understand some of the things I'll be talking later on. But this is a sort of a dashboard that a company would have built to sort of keep track of website stats and, let's say, social media stats, right? So each of these little squares or rectangles is a widget, we call them, and they could be pulling data from a lot of different sources. In this case, it's a Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, but you could also have Google Analytics, but up to 60+ integrations, and then any services or databases that you connect your data or that you have your data living in. So this hopefully is going to give me a bit of context, will help for everyone to sort of be on the same page when I talk about widgets or integration and services. And then I'm part of a success team. There's 7 of us dotted around the world. We hopefully the fact that we're sort of distributed helps us reply to customers as quick as possible. We do have a live dashboard showing our support metrics. But yeah, I'm part of a bigger team, obviously, and this is growing that support team at the same time as growing the development team is what brought some of the issues that we're going to be exploring today. So when I joined at the end of 2014, it was just me and my boss, and then now there's 7 of us, and we're hiring another person. So this sort of growing pains, or this type of growing, was one of the reasons why we sort of experience these pains. So a bit about background on the issue. So in early 2015, we had a solid subscription revenue, but it wasn't increasing at the rate that we needed to meet the ambitious targets set by a CEO and targets that we thought should have been reachable. It should have been within our grasp. So we were a super talented team of hard-working development team, was lacking focus, was lacking a leader. Communication and trust between the engineers and the rest of the company were poor, and it wasn't getting any better. So we lacked direction. A team of 8 engineers was holding 4 stand-ups and working on at least the same amount of disparate projects. So we really desperately needed focus. We needed laser-like focus because of this. The revenue not increasing at the rate we wanted to. We needed to focus. So we brought someone in. We'll call it here a developer whisperer. We brought someone in as a contractor to help us sort of get everyone in line. So he came in, observed how we acted, how we were working, and then started making suggestions. So suggestions were made on the first day, on the first week. But by week 3, we had an idea of what we wanted to do, and this laser-like focus that I mentioned resulted in a transformation project. So the entire development team was aligned to work on a single revenue-enhancing project. That was, I'm going to mention it. It was, we had a Google Sheets integration, so you could pull your data from a Google Sheets. But it was cumbersome. You needed around 14, 15 clicks to get something done. And people were not only using Google Sheets, they had files they wanted to host them in OneDrive or in Dropbox or connect directly an Excel file. So people needed a lot more options, and it needed to be easier to use. So we thought, well, getting data into us to be able to visualize it should be our #1 priority. So we decided, so that was the one project that could unite the whole team. So we dropped everything and focused on that one project. And the new focus quickly bore fruit. Daily releases and user tests giving us a lot of valuable and largely positive feedback about the utility and usability of the new features. So after a few months of this, with the development team much more aligned to company goals, and with the team working productively together, we moved into sort of medium-term improvements to make sure that these changes were long-lasting. So first, we started working on something called action science, which improved everyone's ability to confront difficult issues and jointly design solutions. And then we began using something called elephant carpaccio. It sounds horrible, but it's a technique that allows you to provide value every day from releases, publishing releases to the product. So and this allows you also to react a lot faster to feedback. And you can provide, with this sort of elephant carpaccio methodology, you can provide sanity-checked target dates to the marketing team and sales team. If you want to release a feature, it's no longer, I think it's going to take 3 months. Well, no, you know that you release every single day one thing, so you know how many things you need to release. So it works really well to sort of give target dates for when the changes are going to be released. So then finally, we also were able to from the development team, a leader emerged. So this person was trained and helped to take on new challenges and just be the leader that we were lacking. So the result of all this, after everything was going so well, was to create 2 feature teams that were working on 2 projects at the same time. So yes, initially the idea was to have everyone focus on one project, but once we saw that it was possible and everyone's confidence, and we sort of started working, and this way we realized, because at the same time we were also hiring, so the teams were growing. So at the end of this, we were able to have 2 feature teams working at the same time. The idea was that no one team is more important than others, so we gave them sort of silly names. One is called Taco and Burrito, and engineers could sort of like cross change between projects if that was necessary. But the idea is we had the capacity now and the confidence now to tackle 2 important things at the same time. So life was good. Everything was going really well. But this changes created another problem. And that was that smaller bugs started to accumulate. So in order to create that sense of focus that we were talking about, all engineers were pulled from all projects they were working on. So even the integrations engineers, the people working to connect with all these different services, Facebook, Instagram, Google Analytics, all of them stopped working on that to focus on these 2 projects. A big bug that's affecting everyone, of course, we will tackle that straight away. But like smaller bugs, smaller little things that were annoying, let's say a group of customers or something that we could have done, we could do better, little things were just piling up. Customers who had been with us for a long time were being patient because they had seen the change, in the last, 4 or 5 months. They could see that the minute we started being more focused, better features were going to be released, and we were listening to feedback. So they were a bit patient. They were a bit more patient because they knew if we said, no, we're working on something you're going to dig, you're going to love it. And they saw that, yes, the release is great. So they were trusting us. But new customers that were on trial, didn't know us. So they were not as patient. And obviously, if you're on trial and you raise a bug and it doesn't get sorted straight away, perhaps it's something that is very important to you. Why would you convert? So a lot of the customers were not converting, especially if a customer contacted us to raise a bug and then gave that interaction sort of a bad score. At the end of an interaction, we send everyone an email saying, were you happy with the interaction or were you not happy? So people who were saying they were not happy were, of course, not converting. But the annoying thing about it was not that people were not converting, because not everyone's going to like your product, and not everyone's going to find it useful at the time. Not everyone's going to find it useful, period. But maybe sometimes it's just bad timing. But the issue that we started when we started digging up was that many of these interactions were just to report a bug affecting the one integration they were looking to hire us for. So imagine, if you report a bug on day 1 of your trial, but it takes us 3 months to fix it, well, you clearly didn't find value on the 30 days that the trial lasted. So clearly, not converting. But the worst thing about this was that people thought we didn't care, which is not the case at all. So possible solutions, we've seen a lot of teams use all-hands support, and it works out great for a lot of people, for a lot of teams. But because we were coming out of something that was, with all-hands support, what tends to happen is, as engineers get involved in answering tickets, they see little bugs there and they realize, hey, hang on a minute, that's really easy to fix. I can do this right now. It'll take me 10 minutes. In general, the idea is that engineers aren't really, really engaged, and they begin to feel the pain points, and they know what things could be fixed straight away. So things tend to get fixed quicker. But because we had come out of this sort of directionless period, the last thing we wanted was to take all the developers and then get them answering emails to then go back and dilute that focus. So that wouldn't have worked for us at that stage. Other teams have a sort of triage. Other companies use a sort of triage person between the customer success team and development team, and sort of they help set priorities, and they know a lot about the customer, and they say, look, we are getting a lot of requests about this, or this is annoying a few. It's not just one person. This is getting, so there's usually a person who provides that bridge. But this is also something that we didn't do. We needed to go a bit deeper. So what we did, and I think this is a little caveat here, because definitely results, it's not may vary, will vary. What I'm trying to give you here is things for you to think about. Don't take them as dogma, but they did work for us. We just did it ourselves. So it's important to make clear that from the support team, we had a few people who had sort of a technical, not only mind, but know-how, but also were interested. So this may look different in your company. The idea is to make you think about how sometimes teams can cross-pollinate. So the general approach might work, even if exactly what I'm telling you perhaps doesn't necessarily apply to your team. So we did it ourselves. So the caveat here is that obviously the development team, we had their approval, they helped us get set up, they gave us access, and they continue to help us in every way they can. But for the most part, every single small bug that comes related to integrations and connecting to all these services, we started fixing them. So big bugs, the sort of big development team, the adults, were in charge of them. But we get less of that. Smaller things, we were on top of them. So this happened. I'm going to give you a bit of feedback here, a bit of background here. This specifically happened because we had, for months before this, there was a project that we wanted to, there was an avenue that we wanted to investigate. So one of the success team was very interested in programming and started pairing one of the engineers. This took months. But then that project didn't happen, but this person was still interested, and continues to be. So when we started noticing that there was a problem with the bugs, one day he says, you know what, why don't you just let me poke around? These things are sitting around there anyway. Why not let me have a go? I mean, if we're waiting 3 months and I fix it in 1 month because I'm very slow, he isn't, but imagine, still, it's 2 months earlier than what we would have fixed it. So obviously with the blessing of everyone, we embarked in this sort of small adventure. And the benefit of this is that the communication between the customer and the engineer is streamlined. They don't have to raise a bug with the support team, and then so the support agent passes that on to the developers, and and then the developer asks a question, and then we need to go back. So all that gets cut, and the integrations engineer speaks directly with the customer, and it makes things a lot easier. And also, customers are happier because they know that the person that's fixing their issue is in direct communication with them. So it doesn't just sit there for months. And an obvious also result from this is that the average waiting time, we dropped it by 72%. So from months or a month that used to take, it was now taking on average a week. And this is a sort of, remember I said that the two teams were called, one burrito and one was called taco. Because our team was even smaller, we would call it Tabasco, to keep sort of with the theme. But we have this board that now tells us, how many bugs we fix in a week, the average number of days to solve, the amount of bugs created in a week that we are handling, the bugs that are in a backlog, and the amount of time it takes to solve. And this here, a waiting cake, it's once you fix something that and you want someone else to check it, it's waiting for someone else to do a code review. But this little graph here shows the difference between the amount of bugs that were being solved versus the amount that were created. So yeah, we had a massive backlog, but we started sort of making a real dent. A real dent. So, you know, obviously, an obvious benefit. And what's next now that we've started sort of embarked on this path? Well, we're not really sure. This is something we're testing. But some of the things that we want to investigate and want to spend more time looking into is that do the fact that we now have people dedicated to being on top of this, does this have an impact on conversion rate for trialists, for example, that we knew that they were leaving because we were not fixing things quicker. Now with this faster resolution time, someone who perhaps was waiting for a month, now it took him 7 days, which is not great, but it's not terrible. You still have enough time on your trial, and of course we can obviously extend the trial, but you know what I mean, like within those first week your issue is solved. Does it have an impact on conversion? And does this have an impact on churn? Are we able to tackle churn with this sort of initiatives? And also, can we have a quicker resolution time? Can we go from 7 to 3? You know, you raise a bug on Monday, and then by Thursday you get an email saying like, you're good to go. So in that respect, we now have, instead of 1, we now have 2 people, and we may have 3. So can we get this? Can we get them sorted out quicker? And also, can we use this now that we have all this knowledge, as the sort of engineers are focused on driving the product forward? Many of these integrations sort of that need maybe some love and care. Maybe Facebook has released some, their API has had an update, and there's other things that you can track. Are we able to modify those existing integrations to add new features and to add, not just fix things, but to be able to make them better? Perhaps not make a full revamp of it, but make those integrations a lot better by adding little things here and there. So these are the sort of avenues that we'll start investigating. This is something that is relatively recent. We're new to this, but we can see already a lot of benefit in having people from the support team not just involved in sort of dealing with how the bugs are fixed, but actually fixing them ourselves. Time will tell if we are able to impact on conversion and churn, and I'm sure it will have a quicker resolution time. But time will tell if we're able to have a proper impact on conversion and churn. That's it for me. Thank you very much. Thank you for taking the time. And of course, I can see we have some questions, so I'll be happy to take them now.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Javier. That was a really good presentation. Guys, just to remind you, if you want to ask any questions, if you go to the GoToWebinar software on your right-hand side there and go to the questions box, type out any questions you have, and we'll start answering those now for you. We have had a few questions, Javier, so let me just kind of jump in with a couple from customers and see what your take is on them.
Sure.
So we got the first one here from Tracy, and she's basically said here, seeing as you guys are moving towards a more technical kind of direction in terms of your support staff, does everyone in your customer success team need to be like a junior developer in terms of being able to do coding, etc., or is there still kind of some space for team members who kind of aren't that strong in coding?
Yes, by all means. The product in itself, we do have some sort of need for HTML and CSS knowledge anyway, but not everyone's going to be, there's 7 of us, and I think there's only 3 of us really interested in being a bit more technical. So there is still space for everyone, especially because we're still writing a bunch of articles, we're still running webinars. So there is space to have a sort of mix, and especially not everyone wants to spend time debugging. It can be very time consuming, and not very rewarding until you actually nail it. So it does need a very specific, maybe not personality, but like inclination to want to spend time doing that, and perhaps you get a lot more done in the day if you're writing an article than if you're debugging, especially when you're like a junior. But no, by all means, we're still want to keep the team as as flexible and as varied as possible. So not everyone's going to be a junior developer now.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I'd add to that for people that are kind of interested in that kind of mix, it's kind of, in my opinion, very important to have a good mix of kind of technical support staff alongside customer advocates that kind of are more about customer service and understanding the customer, because if you go too far to either end, you're going to have problems. And so, for example, if you're all technical, you might lose focus and kind of stop championing the customer as the person that they should be effectively, and you stop kind of thinking about being customer obsessed. Effectively, you might start developing the wrong product features or not answering the customer's needs.
By all means, I totally agree.
Awesome. So we had another question here as well, and it's actually about the first kind of like resolution of response time. And so basically, they said here, I hear a lot of focus on lowering like that first response time, and kind of it was also in your slides as well in terms of a metric and stuff. And they're asking, are there not kind of potential pitfalls to quality when focusing on that stat specifically?
Oh yeah, I agree. But there's one thing of response time. I think response time is important, but perhaps not necessarily resolution straight away. You know what I mean? You want customers to know, like we try to reply to every single email within an hour. Now that doesn't mean that the issue is fixed, but I want our customers to get an email from a real human saying like, hey, we're here. If it's something that we can sort out straight away, great. But if it isn't, at least that they don't just get the automated email that they get, confirming that we have received the email. We want to make sure that customers get an email within an hour, if possible. Obviously, weekends make things a bit harder, but we try. Our response time is usually around an hour or two. So especially if you're having issues logging into your account, you don't want to wait for 24 hours for that. So this sort of type, there's tickets or emails that can be resolved really quickly, but the focus and the emphasis is not on just lowering resolution time for the sake of lowering it. But yeah, it's nice to get the first contact with a real human within an hour or two, if possible.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, what I would say to that is, what you need to think about is not just look at like that kind of first resolution or contact time as the important metric. You need to kind of combine them all as like a holistic view, and so you need to think about your customer satisfaction ratings along with that first response time, and kind of look at other metrics as an entire picture rather than just focusing on a single one. So you do want to improve them all, but you want to improve them all at the same time rather than just focusing on a specific one, because if you do kind of focusing on any one in particular, that will be at the expense of your other metrics, and you want to make sure you have that balanced view.
I agree. Like, for example, we're now, I mean, there's something like, for example, you want to bring, this is an example of something that we were talking about today. You want to bring more subscribers. Well, one way could be doing just to lower your prices to €1, and then of course you're going to get more subscribers. But like you were saying, the idea is to have sort of holistic view. You choose a few metrics that are representative and are important, and that you can track, and that that if you track them, they will help you, they will drive you, they will help you arrive to the sort of objective that you have. But yeah, focusing on just a one metric can be misleading, because you're perhaps damaging or perhaps not paying attention to other metrics that you should.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Perfect. Thank you very much. So moving on to our next question here, and this actually comes down to where you talked about the fact that you have your engineers and they help customers directly with their integrations. And someone's asked a question here, and they've asked, if you're doing that, is it scalable as you get more customers?
Sorry, is it scalable to what? To continue?
Yeah, so if you imagine you have your engineers kind of contacting customers directly to help with their integrations. What happens as you get more and more customers? Is that approach scalable, or you're going to find that you're going to start like getting increase response times and stuff simply because you haven't got enough engineers to have that contact?
By all means. I mean, this is something that we're, trialing now. But remember that the engineers that are on our team, they were all sort of success people first. So either they're already contacting customers, so it's part of the role. So for example, one of the engineers has a 50-50, spends 50% of his time coding and fixing bugs, and another 50% of his time emailing customers. Of course, if we just keep, if the bugs continue to just pile up, yeah, it's unsustainable. But one of the things that we have now that we didn't have was the engineers have now a QA engineer. So now new releases pretty much come without bugs. So these are all the bugs that we're focusing on are perhaps older integrations that perhaps didn't have that level of scrutiny before. So pretty much the sort of level of bugs being raised has remained steady. So by us adding to a full-time person and another person half-time, and perhaps me, I'm going to start and spending 20% of my time. It's enough now. Now, if it keeps getting out of hand, then of course it's probably not going to be sustainable, and we'll have to rethink. But at the moment, we are sort of on top of it, and it seems that if we continue the trend now, we will be completely on top of it. In the next 3-4 months. So hopefully we'll just stay on top of it, and that's it.
Yeah, so maybe the secret answer there, kind of reading between the lines, is to kind of release code that's not so buggy so that you can scale better because you don't have to fix all the bugs.
No, and also like the issue with integration is that, Facebook API will change. And there's little things like this that you were calling a specific endpoint on their API, and now all of a sudden that name changed. Little things like this can break the whole integration for customers. And if you don't have the time, these are things that you just need to be on top of it forever. Because all the services we integrate with 60 plus, these people are always driving their product forward, and this means changing their API. So this means we need to be at least on top of it. So having these people here helps us at least be on top of it, and if we can, on top of that, add new features, then great.
Yeah, no, for sure. That's a good answer. So looking here, guys, and remember, if you have any questions, feel free to kind of ask in the questions box, and we'll kind of answer as many as we can. So we have another question here, and someone's saying, how do you prioritize the smaller bugs or kind of like the feature requests to kind of know what to work on in your list?
So we do have a bugs meeting, and this is excellent question. We do have a bugs meeting every week with the product managers and the QA engineer, and we sit together and see what exactly was raised last week. We go through that together. We spend an hour going that together. Of course, if there's something that comes urgent, during the week, then a product manager will sort of reprioritize. But we do have a meeting every week where we go through everything that has been raised, and we see, what's the priority. How many customers are using this? Is this affecting just one customer, or is it affecting many? Is it just one specific browser? So all these things are taken into account, and then together, the success team with the QA engineer and the product team, we sort of come to an agreement and we pretty much give them an order. Some bugs are taken by the core team of developers if it's too complex for us to investigate. But the majority of integration bugs, we just take it and we just prioritize it based on, is it a popular integration? How many people are using it? How many people have reported this? Is it an edge case? So we take all these things into account, and we then sort of prioritize accordingly.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, if you guys are trying to work out how to prioritize this in your own kind of scenarios, what I'd recommend you do is kind of just think about some headline things, like for example, think about the impact it has. So kind of how does it affect your existing customer base, and kind of what pain points are they having because it's kind of not there. And then kind of think about the time it will take you to fix that. So is it a quick, it's going to take an engineer a day, or is it going to take a month? And then think about the cost that kind of implies. And when we talk about cost, it's not just about the engineering time, it's kind of what are the lost revenue opportunities from those customers that might be leaving because you don't have that feature, etc. But also, don't just kind of bow down to customer requests. Think about your product and the vision you have for your own product, and does this feature request fit your own vision as well? Because sometimes you do have to say no to customers too, because sometimes they're asking for things which aren't really like suited to your product. And so kind of think all about all those kind of things there, and then make a decision about what you should prioritize.
By all means, and like for example, for feature requests, we have an internal tracker that we keep track of every single customer request. Even if they, for example, if they get repeated, we do keep track of all of them. But it's a combination between that, where you feel like you're driving the product, where you want the product to go towards, where you're aiming. So does the request fit that vision? So it's a combination between what we're trying to achieve and what customers want, and obviously new features that come out with, for example, services changing their API. So things that are available now that weren't available before. So it's a mix, or we try to arrive to a balance between what customers want or need and what we think the product means and what we're trying to achieve. So it's always a balance between those two things.
Yeah, no, for sure. I appreciate that. Yeah, so we're kind of almost out of time, but we have a time for a few more questions, so keep on asking, guys. If there are any questions we can't answer by the end of the webinar, we will kind of follow up you after the webinar as well. So the next question we have here is, you kind of talked obviously in the webinar about kind of you brought someone in and they kind of helped you to focus on how to improve your processes. And the question someone's asked here is kind of, is that something you could do with like an internal member of staff? So maybe you don't have the budget to kind of bring someone in to kind of affect that change. And so if you're going to kind of use someone internal, what kind of traits should that person have? What kind of person is good to try and understand where you're failing in that connection between support and your development?
Oh, that's a great question. I think there's something to be said about like attention, because obviously it's hard when you're within the team sometimes to pinpoint sort of perhaps vices that the team has, and you're sort of too involved, and perhaps you don't want to be pointing fingers. So I'm not saying it's impossible, but it is really hard to sort of take yourself away from the situation. But yeah, I mean, someone who is not perhaps afraid of maybe annoying a few people by saying the truth, that, hey guys, I think we're doing this wrong, and also be humble enough to say, look, this is a suggestion, why don't we try it for a couple of days, see if it works? Because a lot of what ended up working were just merely suggestions at the beginning, and everyone loved it or they didn't. But nothing was imposed, and I think that worked out really well. Everything was, guys, I've noticed this. Is anyone noticing this the same? And I think the principles of action science are great for that, because they allow you to sort of have everybody be at the same level of understanding. Sometimes we think we're talking about the same thing, but sometimes when you ask and you stop and you ask the question, is this what you mean? Sometimes it isn't. Sometimes we're talking about completely different things. So being aware that we may not always be talking about the same thing is great, but also knowing that many things are just need to be tried out, and they are going to fail. Like for example, when we did when we focused so much on that product of spreadsheets, but we focused solely on it, and it didn't bring the revenue we thought it was going to bring, but it did bring the focus, and we knew it was possible. Customers were super happy because we released a really cool feature. It just didn't bring new customers, the amount of new customers we thought it was going to bring, but it did give us, it did allow the team to work together in a way that we hadn't worked before. So it did work in that respect, even though it didn't work a lot. So if you're not willing to test things out, you should be willing to test a lot of things out and know that a lot of them are going to fail. So you shouldn't be embarrassed or afraid of. I know people sometimes say that, fail fast and whatever, early and fast, I don't know. But yeah, sometimes you do need to test things and they work out, and other times they don't. So a trait for a person is, they must be willing to suggest things, to have their voices heard, but also to point the finger and say, look, I don't think this is working. We should try something different. And that's one of the things I noticed that worked was not imposing anything, and be humble enough to just see it as a mere suggestion.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I would add to that is I would kind of think a bit more in terms of your company ethos as well, because you want to make sure you have the right environment where your staff members can kind of challenge the norms. And so at Kayako, we have various mantras, and one of them is kind of what we call fight the resistance. And that basically means don't accept the normals, and if the process, you think is wrong, you kind of bring that up and say, I know we're doing it this way, but we think it's wrong. And if you have all your staff kind of having those kind of mantras in their mindsets and stuff, it kind of makes them all act as those advocates to drive that change.
I agree.
So I think we've got time for maybe one or two more questions. So we got one from a customer here, and they're basically saying here is how do they establish communication between the developers and the support team, specifically when they're like a leaderless startup? And so Zaza here said, I'm an account manager and I don't know how to approach the lead developer. Everybody is busy and already working on some other ticket, and so they're just looking for some advice on how they can kind of bridge that gap.
Oh, I mean, especially in growing startups, everyone's going to be busy. But if you have buy-in from the sort of CEO, if everyone acknowledges the fact that there is an issue, it's a lot easier. And especially, I think you touched upon that on the sort of company ethos. Like we want to be a very open company, and we want to talk about everything. And there's one of our sort of the company, let's say guidelines, I'm forgetting the word right now. It's just like, make sure, we want to be able to listen, to act on not just criticism, but like be able to engage on a real conversation. So, approach that person, the lead developer, and, set up a meeting and say, acknowledge that everyone's busy, but like maybe provide them an agenda to begin with and say, look, I want to talk about this, and this. And I think, I want to hear your thoughts on this because I think there's ways that we can improve. But just don't be afraid of tackling things head on, because a lot of the times we don't have time to be beating around the bush. And people think that meetings are a waste of time, but a lot of it is because we spend the time just beating around the bush. I need 15 minutes of your time to talk about this. That goes a long way, and it's important that everyone sort of knows where they stand, and knowing that that someone can give actual general sort of feedback, genuine feedback, in both cases. So, just approach them as you would anybody else, hopefully.
Absolutely. I mean, a couple of things that I would say there to you as well, because sometimes it's not so obvious, but your developers, they do want to know what your customers want. They do actually want that feedback. And so although they might appear very, very busy, you might not realize that they are going to be very open to having that conversation with you because they want to know how they can help customers better and what customers are looking for. And so kind of just want to go to your developer and say, look, I want to make your job easier, and I can do that by telling you what customers are looking for and where they're struggling with the things that you're designing, and they want to hear that feedback. And so just kind of approach them, and they're going to be open to that conversation for sure.
No, but also nobody wants to build a product that nobody wants to use. So by all means, it should be this, or the attempt should be to have these conversations as often and as genuine and as open as possible, because nobody wants to spend their time building something that nobody wants to use. So I agree with you completely.
Absolutely. Awesome. So I'm afraid, guys, we're out of time today. If you do have any questions, feel free to drop us an email at Kayako, and we're happy to answer any further questions with you. With that, I'd like to thank you all for attending today. We really appreciate your time, and hopefully you've got some stuff you can take away to your own companies and your own teams and kind of make some meaningful changes to your development and support cycle.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for joining us.